Drowning in travel hacking content and don't know where to go next? Not sure if you want to open lots of credit cards and take classes to figure out how to use all those points? Trying to buy a house or car soon and worried about the multiple credit checks on your score but still want to travel? We got you this week. Today we're breaking down our yearly travel talk, our number one strategy for traveling more on a budget without the need for credit card points, although you can still use them with this strategy too. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Travel More podcast.
Each episode, we share custom itineraries, travel hacks, expert advice, and even stories of our past travel failures to help you level up your travel game.
I'm Shelly, a lover of plans, itineraries, and cheap flights. I'm an expert deal finder with one eye always on the budget.
And I'm Bruce, the improviser, ready to pick up where plans fail to turn letdowns into unexpected trip favorites. We're here to bust through barriers that stop you from making your travel dreams a reality.
So book that flight, buy the tickets, and say hello to your next adventure.
This is the Travel More Podcast. Welcome back to the Travel More Podcast.
Welcome.
Season 2, after the longest break we've taken since we started this, a year ago.
About a month, I think we've not done it.
I know it
seems crazy.
It seems so long, and I can't believe we just did our 31st episode. This is 32.
32.
So it's nice to be back, and we're talking about, we kind of come full circle.
I was about to say, we're like coming back to the beginning, because this episode is actually just a remake, a update is a better way to say that.
An update, yeah.
An updated version.
We're going to share the things that we've learned and what we'd want to improve upon.
Yeah. And we definitely have learned a lot this year, especially when it comes to points and miles. And so we kind of wanted to add that. Although I will say my favorite part about the travel talk and this strategy in general is that you can do it without having to rely on credit card points and miles. So we're a lot of our episodes, we've been talking about points and miles a lot, and they are a great way to get free and cheap travel. But some people just aren't in the position necessarily to jump into credit cards.
Yeah, you might not be in the position, you might be nervous just about opening up a credit card, especially if you've never done it before.
Mm-hmm. You might not be able to.
Yeah, you might not be able to. It might not be the right time for you to start, down that process of learning and figuring it out. But,
right. So there are other options is what we're here to tell you today. And so this is a great time to do it, I think. And I am such a New Year's person. I like the beginning of years. I'm a teacher, so I like the beginning, middle, and end, and that's August to June or something as a teacher. And then I have my personal beginning, middle, and end, and that's January to December. So it's interesting. I literally have two planners, two different start and stop times on my planners.
And that's exactly why I don't have any planners, because Shelly pretty much takes care of it for me. But no, really, I think it's nice to have these opportunities to think about resetting and laying out your goals. And I think, you've definitely done a good job of training me up on thinking this way, because this year it's been, I think, how many years have we been doing that breakdown of
this is
passion
different.
planner?
I was going to say, so we have two different things we do at New Year's. What you're talking about, the breakdown, it's just a general goal setting. And that is the passion planner has a free download that we use. And so I think it's 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, lifetime. And you set goals for each of those things. And you do them separately and you come together, which is kind of fun just to see if you're on the same page,
It is really fun, because I always when we do it, I like seeing what each of us put down in the different categories and where we agree and where we're thinking differently.
Right. And this year I actually think that we are pretty aligned. See, the more you do it, obviously, the more you check in, the more you know that you're kind of aligned. And this year I think that there wasn't anything that was different. I mean, there might have been different wordings or extra things that were on somebody's, but they weren't in a different direction.
Yes, which is fun. But either way, these nice times to kind of just step back and take advantage of looking at the past and planning for the future. Mm-hmm. It's really the foundation of why the Travel Talk works and why we've been able to take advantage of as much time and as little money as we've had to spend all these years, whether or not we use points and miles.
Yeah, so let's talk what this travel talk looks like. So always, and the way that we do this, we try to make it as fun as possible, because some of this is not that fun, because you're talking about budget and stuff like that.
It's one of those things, most of the time I would say the people we talk to are not excited about sitting down and planning and budgeting and doing all this, because they're not Shelly.
I would say it's my favorite thing to do on a Saturday night, but not everybody is like that. And so if you're not, I would suggest finding something to make it a little more bearable. So a fun drink or a fun dessert thing, or something that you're making almost an event out of it.
Yes, make it an event for sure.
Yeah, and so you sit down with your player 2.
That's me.
So that would be some travel talk or travel hacking lingo. So player 1 and player 2 is just whoever you're going to travel with. So it doesn't have to be a spouse. Obviously, not everyone's married. Could be anybody, friend, family, whoever you're like going to plan your travel with that year.
Right. So once you have this person, you're really just looking to find out all your blackout dates for the year. Any conflicts, if you know you've got a wedding coming up, or if there's a time of year, let's say you've got kids and you know they play soccer or basketball, and there's just a time of year where it's just never going to be good to go on a weekend.
Yeah. Or, I mean, conversely, the opposite. So you know that like April is like a slow time in your company, and that might be a good day to take a trip or a long weekend or whatever. You're kind of like planning out those potential or shorter dates. So like for Bruce and I, because we know our entire schedule right off the bat, because they're both teacher schedules, it's easy for us to plan exact dates.
Right, because we have such an inflexible schedule.
Yeah.
So we know exactly when we've got, like, any 3-day weekend, any long break that we both share, being, you know, working
Obviously
in schools.
summer.
Yep, summertime, spring break usually, Christmas
Yeah.
break.
Yeah, so you're going to like find out those for you, or you're going to make them up. You like if you don't have those set times, create them.
Yes, exactly. Because if you might be inflexible with your schedule where it's set in stone, or you could have a much more flexible schedule. So then you're going to want to think about what's your ideal like time.
Yeah.
So
how long do you want your trips to be, and how many?
Exactly. So you could say I want to have 2 3-day weekends and maybe like a 10-day bigger trip. And I know there's certain times of year it's easier, for me to take off. That's what, if you have a more flexible time versus inflexible, that's what you do first.
Yeah. And then once you have the schedule, it's time for the budget. Everyone's least favorite part. I love it, but no one else does. We set aside a lot of money for travel. It's just the nature of how we budget our own like house budget. We also don't have kids, so we have a little more playing room. So when we talk about some of our travel like talk, it may feel like, well, that's totally out of reach. And it may be that you can't do exactly the same things that we do all year, but that's not the point anyways. The
Right.
point is to figure out what time and money can you personally carve out where you're going to feel comfortable. And so I would suggest kind of figuring out how many vacations you want to take and how long they can be, and then trying to find out kind of a general budget from there.
Right. And we always like to calculate this per person. So when we think about, it's just easier this way, especially if you're searching for flights or anything, as
Right.
opposed to doing like your family of 5. You're just looking one person, what do I think it's going to be? And then you can multiply that across how many people are going.
Yeah, exactly. And then figuring out what a budget should or could be can be a little bit of a learning curve. The more often you do this, the better you'll get a sense of like, okay, so if I have $3,000, like what can that get me? The answer is many, many things. But you wouldn't necessarily know that until you start kind of playing with numbers. So for now, you're giving yourself as much money as you can comfortably for each of these trips. And then as you do this more and more, as you look at different destinations, you'll kind of come up with like, what does that actually mean? Like what does $3,000 actually mean? For Bruce and I, that's an international trip for a week. We do live in like really close to New York City, and so that helps us out plane travel
Definitely
wise.
helps us out.
But for $3,000, we would suggest, or we would see that as that's a week in an international city.
Right.
But you may think $3,000, that sounds like, going down to our local beach for a week. It depends on where you've been looking for your travel and what. So I would keep an open mind with your budget. Don't try to say like, well, I only have $3,000. That's not going to get me anywhere. Yes, it will. So
Yeah.
keep it open. Keep your mind open with that.
The point is to do the work ahead of time, and that's why we like to do it at the top of the year, or and honestly, when it makes the most sense for your new year cycle, to look at, if I do the work now and I know my time, I know my money, the next part, which is the fun part, is how to find the destinations that will make sense for that.
Right. Yeah, that's where our favorite tool of all time comes in. It's called Going now. I can never get used to calling it Going.
I know,
as
it's always
opposed to
going to be
Scotch Cheap Flights.
It's always going to be Scott's Cheap Flights to me.
But I've had this for probably 5 or 6 years now, and it is my number one like must-have travel tool if I'm gonna do like non-points and miles travel. And they're starting to kind of roll out a points and miles version too. I haven't found great luck with that one, so I won't go as far as recommending that one just yet. I think they're going to get the kinks out of it, but for now, they're like, not basic membership, but it's the premium one, so it's like the first tiered membership, to me is worth every single penny. Every single year, I save way more money than it costs. I think it's something
yeah.
like $60 a year or something.
It's not much.
It's not that
and
much.
It's for the whole year. And like
Right.
all the things we've gotten for it, some we've talked about before, but we went to Paris for $350 round trip per person. Portugal was $400, and that was at Christmas time. Same with Paris. Greece was $450, which I
And
know
it was
Greece.
peak summer.
Yeah, Greece can be tough. You know, I think it's
I think
not.
right now, my friend just looked at a trip to Athens, and it was $1,200.
Yes, well, I was gonna say, I think it's one of those airports. Depending on where you live, I know we're thinking about the East Coast. It's definitely not like a big hub. Not like going to Frankfurt, for instance, in
Right.
Germany. You're almost always going to find cheaper options just because of the amount of traffic.
Right.
So we just talked to a friend that's going to Europe, and we talked about how like flying into Prague was difficult. So when you look at these, Scott's cheap flights can be helpful.
Yeah.
You know, this is where the whole idea, the foundation of the travel talk is that you're doing the work to set up ahead of time, your money and time, and then you're letting the destination come to you.
Yeah.
Because if you're like our friend we were talking to, they were trying to fly to Prague, and that's like Greece, where if you're going and you're fixed on where you want to go, the prices can be really high. But
And sometimes that is what it is.
yeah, and sometimes it is what it is, but we've been able to go to a lot of different places way cheaper because we've let it come to us using Scott's cheap flights.
Yeah, and let me tell you what that means. So if we say like, you know, letting the destination come to us, it's essentially like I'll use last year as a better example of this, but in January we decided here's the money we want to spend in these different times of the year, and that's it. Right. And then the rest of it was like, we don't even know exactly where we're going to go, but we'll go somewhere and we'll see what kind of comes up for us.
Right.
And then using Scott's cheap flights or going in April, both years, in the last 2 years that we've done this, in April, we've gotten an alert for Christmas time, which is exactly when we need. You know, it's like the busiest, most expensive time to travel. And they were both like within our price range. So with Paris, we wanted to spend no more than $3,000 for that week, and those tickets came up at $350 a piece. So that's
left
not
a lot
it's
of
a lot of
room.
room in
Yeah.
our budget. And then the next year we want to challenge ourselves even more. So we had $2,000 for a week in Portugal, well, a week in Christmas, and then the Portugal tickets came up, and they were $400. So you'd think that actually made it more expensive, but then Portugal and Spain itself was much cheaper than France.
Yes.
So it evened out to where we did only spend $2,000 for the week. And so that, I think, is the most important part of using Going on Scott's cheap flights is you're not going necessarily to say, like, I hope a deal from Paris comes through this year.
Right.
It's like, I hope a deal that fits in our time constraints and budget comes up this year.
Yes.
And it will.
Now, if you do have a very flexible time and you already know that's the only time I would say you might wait until you see a deal. If you're someone who could be like, wow, it's next month, like, all right, I'm taking my holiday now. I'm using my vacation.
Then you can be a little more like picky about your destination.
But either way, knowing and having ahead of time so that you're ready when the deal drops is kind of the whole point of the strategy.
Absolutely. And then another good tip that this is what actually we told our Prague friends is to take a repositioning flight or look into repositioning
Yes, that's
flights.
exactly where I was thinking with that story.
Yeah. So repositioning flight is where you fly to an airport to take advantage of their deal. So ours is too easy, so I'm not going to use it because we live in Connecticut, but that means we have Boston, New York, Hartford. Like, we have so many airports that almost doesn't seem fair. So let me use a really tricky situation, which is Memphis. So Memphis, like smack dab in the middle of the country, that airport is technically international, but I think it may only go to Mexico internationally.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty small airport. And so I would definitely set up flight alerts for Memphis just in case, because you never know. But I would also set them up for Atlanta because I know that I could get a cheap and quick flight to Atlanta from Memphis. It's like an hour flight. I could even drive if I wanted to. And I'm going to get so many more deals from the Atlanta airport than I will from the Memphis one. And so that can pretty much work. Unless you're really in the middle of nowhere, that idea of repositioning flights is going to be the best bet for you. I'd always set up one flight alert from my home airport because you never know. And then I'd always set it up for the next closest like hub. So like big city airport.
Yeah, you want to get an idea of where you live and what those two would be.
Exactly.
So another great option to find your destination is to use the Google Flights Fly Anywhere option. So essentially you put your dates and home airport in and see what comes up.
It'll tier it from the price. So,
Yes.
like, it'll say, like, what's the cheapest place you can fly during these dates? And it gets, more and more expensive as it goes down. But you can literally look at a full world map.
It's really fun.
It is fun.
I think it's a cool tool because, I honestly, Google for hotels too is a similar. You look at a map and you can get like all these ranges of things.
Right.
But I think it's really helpful, and it usually gives you the honest like price of things. So you could, you're not going to find anything super low compared to what you're seeing because Google is looking at all the websites that are listing it.
Yeah, and there are a couple of airlines that don't come up on Google Flights. Southwest is a notable one, but most all of them do, and it at least gives you a good like range of like, if you can find somewhere for $90, then maybe you don't want to take the $90 flight, but hopefully because there is a $90 flight, the rest of the flights aren't that far out of that budget, if that makes sense. Because we love a good, budget airline for bringing down the price of flights. Yes. If you don't fly them, you should at least appreciate them because they bring them down. I
know. I've said this a lot because people give it a bad rep, like all the budget airlines. I'm like, but they are kind of creating competition. So
even if you don't fly them, you should hope that they stay in business.
Love them or hate them, they're a good thing, I'd say.
Yeah, so Google Flights is like my favorite tool if you're going somewhere soon.
Yes.
Like if you don't have time to wait for these great flight deals. So maybe you do your travel talk in January, but you were actually hoping to go somewhere for February, like President's Day weekend or whatever. That's not a lot of time to wait for, flight deals. That's
the ones,
soon.
like the ones we were talking about before that Scott's Cheap Flights usually sends out. Those you got to be ready in advance for. But if not, Google is a great way to look for. So what's out there right now, that's cheap.
Right, exactly. That's actually how we found our 40,000 point, not dollars, 40,000 point flight to London was through Google Flights. So
yes,
definitely don't overlook them. And just keep in mind that I would say if you're going at an extremely busy time like Christmas, you want to start like looking for flight alerts about 9 months ahead of time, ideally. And if you're looking for somewhere, if you're very flexible, you could be looking in the next month or two for flight deals. If you're not as flexible, I'd say at least give it, if you can, 4 to 6 months to just have a deal hit that you're like ready to take, if that makes sense. Like it's not necessarily going to come tomorrow.
Right.
You want to give yourself some time, and that's exactly why we do this travel talk in January, so that we're just looking all the time. And we get the emails all the time. And if one feels like it says the dates, that we want to go and the price seems right, then we're ready to jump on it because we've done all this pre-work.
And I know it sounds like a lot. Like if for somebody who's not planning and thinking ahead and this is like a foreign concept, if you just do a little bit of it and practice over time, you'll get better and better, and then the reward will help you do more.
Yeah,
because the reward really is, if you're motivated to take trips and travel when you haven't been, even if it's like short, local, more regional things all the way to international, this is the best way to build momentum. And that's kind of the idea we're getting at, is when you do these things, you start to build habits that are really going to help you.
Yeah. So let's talk about our last year travel talk. We did like a fairly in-depth review of our year of travel, the last episode. So we're not going to go into like details about each of these, but just to give you an idea of like what we said in January versus kind of what happened or how it helped us.
How close did we stick to our initial plan?
Right. So we're starting in March, and we actually did go to New York a couple of times, and I'm going to talk about this later, but for us, New York is essentially local, and a lot of times we don't even stay overnight. So those kind of fall more into like our regular daily planning, like our regular household budget, more than our travel budget.
Right.
Like it's the same as us going out to like a fancy dinner.
I think for us, I wouldn't count it. It's kind of like if you lived near any major city and you just went into it once in a while.
Yeah.
So for us, it's, that's just kind of, we're lucky to be close to it.
But if you're listening to this being like, wait, I listened to your other one and you definitely mentioned stuff before March. You're right. It's just they're smaller, closer trips, and they all came out of our like
Hey, they still
household.
count, because I will say.
Oh, no. They count.
That's
just not in our travel budget.
No, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But they are a great way to get started, because I know people are like, man, I haven't done anything. And I'm like, did you even just explore your town or the towns over? We had a whole episode about local travel, and I think it's important to just get in the habit of doing something different.
Yep, out of your comfort zone for sure. So let's start March. In March, we went to Las Vegas for a business trip. The dates weren't flexible, the location wasn't flexible, and we paid almost the same for those tickets as we did to go to Paris.
Yep.
So that's the reason we suggest this method, is so you don't get stuck doing that, because that hurts when you know that you could go to Paris, but instead you're going. I mean, Las Vegas is fine. It's not like a terrible place to go, but it just, when you know you could go for a week in Paris and instead you're going for 3 days to Las Vegas, it's a bit of a sword in the heart. So that was not part of the plan, except for that we knew we had to do it, and it was close. In April, we went to London and we grabbed the low price by watching Google Flights, which we talked about.
This is the one that saved us because we weren't the clock was ticking on us, and we usually are so much better about having well in advance our April break because that can be a really tough time.
It was Easter week this year too.
It was Easter week, so we were lucky because well, I'll give you an example. We were going to do Scotland, but our group that we were going to go with wasn't ready to commit when the deal hit. So
by the
it
time
slipped
we
through our
did
fingers.
it left.
And that's okay. That happens.
I forgot about that. That's a good learning point.
Yes, it was a learning moment, a tough one, but it should, if you're not ready to pull the trigger on these things, that's what's going to stop you. It's a great example of, what stops you from taking these trips. But anyway, so we used the Google Flight Alerts.
Because we are not flexible on time or destination.
Yes.
I think we'd learn our lesson here. We could have gone I forgot about not Florida, but I forgot about Scotland.
Yes, that was our primary. We thought we were going to do that, but then it didn't work out.
And then I know we could have gone to Copenhagen as well for about $300, but it didn't really fit the itinerary we wanted. It was my dad's first trip to Europe. We wanted to go somewhere where the language barrier wasn't really a thing,
right?
To kind of ease him in. So that's why we didn't. But it shows you that if we had been a little more flexible on our destination, we could have gone to Copenhagen for even cheaper. So we went to London. And then in May, we had set aside Memorial Day and said that we wanted to do something outdoorsy, like camping. And so we ended up going to Lake George that weekend. And that was a good example of we already knew we wanted to do something. And so then at the beginning of May, we're like, all right, so where do we want to go? And we hadn't been there, and that's what we chose. But we may not have done it at all if it wasn't literally written on our calendar. Yeah,
I think we would have just come to the 3-day weekend and realized, oh, wow, it's a 3-day weekend.
Right.
And then it would be, not too late, but it'd be tough to say, it's like that week, it's Wednesday, and you're like,
right.
I'm just going to laze at home again or whatever, get caught up in something.
But putting it on your calendar really helps.
It does help.
In June, we went on June and July, we kind of always know that, in June, we're always going to Disney World. It's part of the business, and we love it. And then in July, we pretty much travel the full month. So it's what are we going to do to fill that month? So June, we went to Disney World, Memphis with the family. That was part of our, budget no matter what, because we know we're going. We know how much it costs. Done. That is another good thing is you can put those type of things in your budget from the beginning, and they don't feel like such a stretch once you get there, because you've been saving for it the whole year.
Right.
And then July was a little interesting this year because I got the opportunity. So we knew that we had the month. So that was a big part of this. And then I got the opportunity to go as a grant to Norway for about 2 weeks. So that was kind of paid for and done in its own separate way. But because we were there and we knew we had more than 2 weeks, we started looking at how could we expand this trip as opposed to just leaving it. And we found, we finally did get to Copenhagen.
Yeah, we
found 6,000
I know, that's funny. I didn't realize. I forgot
points.
we looked at it as an option.
We totally
April.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the only reason that we even did that is because we knew we had the rest of the month and we were we're already kind of over there. What else can we do?
Right.
So as opposed to just giving, this amazing opportunity that, I'm not at all hating on the opportunity to go to Norway. That was amazing in itself. But we could even make more out of it because we had already had this talk and we had the budget set aside.
Yeah, we had the time, and because we, the grant you wrote kind of covered a lot of Norway, which was awesome.
All of it, pretty much.
Yes.
And so then we had our summer budget still sitting there. And we'd already been saving for it. So it wasn't even can we spend this money? It was no, we have this money to spend on this. So we went to Copenhagen. I think we spent around $600, maybe a little more, on hotels for the 6 nights.
Yep.
And then I got this amazing cruise deal that no one was going to because I think that cruises out of Copenhagen aren't super popular.
Maybe not.
And so
it's definitely not the Sunshine Caribbean kind of vibe.
No, it's not. And this is the first time
or
they
the
did this.
Mediterranean vibe.
Yeah, it was the first time they did this route. I don't know if they'll do it again. And so they weren't filling the ship very well, and so they started putting out all these deals. And I grabbed one since we were there. And I think it was $2,000 for a full balcony room, full week.
Of us.
Oh yeah, for both of us.
For a week on a
for
cruise.
A full week, food, everything included. So that was pretty awesome. And we already had the money set aside because it was already part of our summer thing that we'd already planned. So there you go. It's the power of the travel talk. Then we used our regular kind of budget to do those, like we said, the local trips for us: New York, Boston, Cape Cod. Those didn't come out of our regular budget. We didn't stay overnight. They're kind of just day trips.
Quick go, yeah.
Yeah. And we'll replace our eating out budget for the weekend to go to New York City. So like we'll do that kind of thing where we'll like exchange them for local trips. Which is another hint. If you're like, oh, but this cool thing's going up, then go do it.
Right.
Just don't eat out that week.
Yeah, exactly.
If that's part of your normal budget.
And that's always what I like to think too when we're gone. We usually are spending a set amount on groceries or gas. So when Shelly's like, should we buy anything more? And I'm like, yeah, we would have spent this on groceries anyway, but we're here now, so. All right, so those are some of the local trips that we don't necessarily include in our budget, but that brings us to Halloween Horror Nights, another planned trip that has become like a yearly thing. And I know the dates and location weren't really flexible, but we did book the hotel in January since we knew ahead of time.
Yeah, which saved us.
Yeah, which saved us a lot actually, because I know it's a busy time when we go, like Columbus Day weekend. So it's definitely it's nice to save where we can because we planned ahead. Yeah, because we know we're gonna spend a certain amount on the tickets and the plane, all of that. Well, even the this is where we typically take one of those budget airlines down. Yeah. Because why not? It's a quick flight to Orlando for us. So, it was nice to even grab those when we saw it because we know we're going. So we're able to like watch and see when they drop. So we're not buying tickets on like a bad day to do it. Or, when, if you track on Google, it gives you a nice history too of like, is this a bad time? Is it price unusually high? Yeah. Well,
and I think the biggest thing is if in January you are going to go somewhere in October, you can kind of watch the trends because that's way too early. Like you don't want to buy January tickets almost ever. You really usually want to do 3 to 5 months out for domestic travel. So you can kind of watch the trends for a little bit to see like, what are they? Like, are they $300 tickets? Are they $400? And so then that helps you when they actually do drop and you're like, well, these are $150. I haven't seen them below, $300 in the last 2 months. Like that's when you buy them.
That's a really good rule of thumb because I know we were talking to somebody just about, so when should I book hotels and when should I look for flights? Yeah. So I think hotels definitely far in advance is better.
Yeah, I mean, hotels are one of those things where you can put it off, but if you're going at a very busy time, like Halloween Horror Nights.
Or like London at Easter time.
Right. You're going to run into just low inventory.
Inventory goes down. Yeah. So, and there's no really fear that, like, hotel prices are not as in flux as flights. Yeah. But, again, like, you don't necessarily need to buy your flights as far out as hotels. So, travel, planning, rule of thumb from us, number one, hotels, you could look in advance. Flights like 3 to 5 months, depending. Domestic, closer. International, like 5, 6?
Yeah, 7 maybe. Kind of depends on where you're going. I would start to watch the trends maybe around 9 months. Yes. See what's going on with them, and then
set up those email alerts from Google.
Yes, for sure. So by watching them, we were able to grab tickets for $150 round trip as opposed to like $300. So we saved ourselves some money there too.
All right, and then we got our Christmas plane tickets the same way.
This was a crazy story.
Yes.
Because we were watching those, and they were to Orlando, the same place that we went for Halloween Horror Nights, and because we went with family for a family trip, and they were like over $500 to Orlando. It was wild.
I know, and that's like never. They're always cheaper than that.
Yeah. I've literally never paid $500. Well, okay, that's not true. One time to go to Africa, we paid more than $500 for plane tickets. But beyond that, all of our trips out of the country have never been that expensive.
I know.
So
I
to
feel
go
like
to
people
Orlando,
are gonna say they don't believe us.
That's fine.
You don't have to. Well, yeah, but for like single flights, especially with points and miles now, we definitely, and using this method, we always save on flights. Yes. That is the biggest thing to save on.
Yeah. So we saw $500 for Orlando. I was like, absolutely not. I will literally drive through the night before I pay $500 to go to Orlando.
But I'm remembering this now. So we were actually in Copenhagen when we saw them jump down. Yeah. Because we were tracking them. It gave us an alert.
Yeah, and I don't even know what time it was in the U.S., but I, messaged the family group, and I was like, they dropped to $200. Everyone needs to buy them this second.
I remember.
Yeah, and there actually weren't enough tickets for all of us. Like, someone had to buy them outside of... I mean, they were still, $250 or something, which was still, more than half of what they were, or less than half of what they were.
Did we need to use a VPN for that, too? Or was this a different...
Maybe.
I remember. You did it. That's right. Well, I will say here's a quick tip. So if you're outside of the country and you're trying to buy tickets, for anything, just know that IP addresses are tracked. So sometimes that can affect stuff. I remember we were doing this when we were looking at the cruises too. It's hard to see, unless you redirect, it's going to give you the prices in euros and things. Oh, yeah. So anyway, that was wild. But that's just a good example of if you don't have those alerts up,
Yeah.
And you
or you don't know you're
you
for
don't
sure
know the
going.
trends too, because some
Yeah.
people might say, "Oh wow, it's 500 to Orlando. I guess that's just what it is."
Oh, you don't know how many people have said that to me, and I'm like, no, that's
Uh-uh.
not it. But we were in Copenhagen in late July, and that was our Christmas trip. Do you know what I mean? So it still was like a good amount of time away, but because
Yes.
it was Christmas or Easter or like any of these major kind of travel holidays, you're going to need to be like way ahead of the game to get these kind of like alerts.
Right. And I know like usually Christmas, spring break are times, and potentially summer where we would wait for the destination to come to us to get those deals. But this year we spent more time with family.
Yeah.
So some of those things were less flexible.
I
But-
say that like it's a bad thing. It was a great year of travel. I'm like,
I don't wanna say that, I guess.
family. No, it was great. It was a little different than our normal because we would usually not have chosen all those. Like we kept saying like the dates weren't flexible. The dates are never flexible for us, but
Right.
almost always the destination is.
Yes.
Except for Halloween Horror Nights and that Disney trip.
Like I say, I'm pumped that we did this because two different, knowing in our family, obviously they know us as people who travel a lot. So they
Yes.
come to us for advice and suggestions on how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since we went with your dad to London, now I feel like he's ready to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And
And we went with family and for Christmas, and now we're already planning for like a summer thing.
yeah, it's like the momentum's there.
Get the bug. I'm
Everybody
telling
was
ya.
like, wow, this is great. How come we haven't taken a vacation this long?
Like, let's go.
What are we doing next? And I was like, all right, you want to go like
Grab the momentum.
Yeah, like where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Let's go. And the conversation's already happening. We already have an idea of a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like,
Travel talk is already underway.
and everyone already feels more comfortable with the idea of it.
Yeah.
Because even all the little things that you cross off your list, like what do I pack? How do I get to the airport? What is this gonna? What does it look like? What's transportation?
Right.
Once you do it once or twice, it just gets easier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's our travel talk. We're looking to do more driving, less flying this year, if it stays as it is.
Well, because we have a new baby puppy dog.
Oh my gosh.
who's
Who
been
has been quite the adventure to record with today.
yeah, she's been whining a lot. So this has been fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't hear her in the background. Anywhere.
Yeah. So we are thinking maybe our trip out west or something like that. So the deals may not be as good, especially because usually it's flying that we're taking advantage of some of these deals on. But we're still doing it, still playing it out just like before, so that if anything crazy comes up or fun, then we can take advantage of it because we know we'll be there at the time.
Yes.
So it's still worth doing even if you don't plan on flying a lot, just to have it in the books, ready to go.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we want to hear from you guys. We've had a number of people join our Facebook group and like get on board with our newsletter and everything. But the best part about having that group is that we can hear from you if anybody's tried this out, and we'd love to hear like what do you have planned this year.
Yeah, we have a lot of new destinations that we're definitely going to be asking for tips on. So
Yes,
if you live
please.
out west or if you go often, definitely go on there and help us out.
Yeah, and everybody that's got dogs, please let us know.
Yeah, how did it go?
We've got, that's definitely something we're going to build this year is like, where's all the dog-friendly places? How do you deal with this loud puppy that has too much energy? All these questions that I'm sure some of you know the answer to.
Yeah, so come help us, please, from our Facebook group.
Please do it. But
I'll put the link in the show notes.
thanks for listening.
Until next time.
Did you know that every time you book a Disney or Universal vacation, you're paying for a service that you may not even be using?
Really?
That's right. Travel agent costs are added to your Disney or Universal vacation, whether you use one or not.
So you're telling me that I'm paying for something even though I'm not getting the help?
You got it. So next time you want to book a theme park vacation, make your money work for you. By booking with Magic Pass Travel, you'll get our expertise and years of experience without paying any extra and while supporting a small business.
Check out our show notes to find our contact information.
Can't wait to help you plan your next adventure.